see the writing on the wall, and it's spreading just like an infection. The problem is we'd rather hate than love, or blame improper font selection. Bold, italic, underline. If we give it a moment, it could shine. To ban it would be a measure so drastic. How can you hate a font that's so fantastic? Just watch how you kern it. Comic Sans is the best font in the world. If you want your designs to look like they're done by little girls, Comic Sans best used in moderation. Come on, join me, the Comic Sans Nation. And if I asked you to join in the crusade, would you do it without hesitation? To cure the world of fontophobia, eliminate all font frustration. Cause bold, italic, underline, if you give it a moment, it could shine. To ban it would be a measure so drastic. How can you hate a font that's so fantastic? Slanted is the new italic. Comic Sans is the best font in the world. If you want your designs to look like they're done by little girls, Comic Sans best used in moderation. Come on, join me, the Comic Sans Nation. And on the subject, I just want you to know that we've been pronouncing it wrong. It's true. The sans part is actually French, so it should sound like a mix-up. Bold, italic, underline. If we give it a moment, it could shine. To ban it would be a measure so drastic. How can you hate a font that's so fantastic?
It's time to make an impact. Your favorite maestro, yes, you know I rock well. I bring it extra hot, but this is not hell. Better could get a connection to any letter or number, and we'll make it lose 20 years younger when you got a tablet. Feeling so wild, or if you're more of a bookman, old style. Oh, CRA game, we got the best font in the world, and I maintain, girl, you totally want type CE. Well, let's avoid those giddy up SCGs. Everybody put your hands in the aerial. Get them up high, and my wing needs to carry you. In the future, a nation to use what I do. You're living in the past. I'll make these times you roam in the streets, painting walls with a brush script. But there's a bottom which you'll never get enough.
Comic Sans is the best font in the world. If you want your designs to look like they're done by little girls, Comic Sans best used in moderation. Come on, join me, the Comic Sans Nation. Comic Sans is the best font in the world. If you want your designs to look like they're done by little girls, Comic Sans best used in moderation. Come on, join me, the Comic Sans Nation. Comic Sans, the font that's misunderstood. Please don't use it for evil, but use it for good. Comic Sans best used in moderation. Come on, join me, the Comic Sans Nation.
So I hope you thought that was as funny as I did. Though our speakers are going to have a hard time topping that, I think, probably. So I'll start off with Dave Roberts, who's going to be going first. Dave Roberts comes to us with over 20 years experience in marketing and worked for several years in Cincinnati for the ad agency. I guess is it MKTG?
It is MKTG, yeah.
Okay, working with P&G, Fresh Express, and Kroger, amongst other brands. Currently, Extensis Community Engagement Program Manager. Dave is tasked with building an online community for design professionals. The demonstration will be a little bit later, and that will be by Chris Meyer. Chris is a longtime veteran in the creative industry. Chris began his career in advertising and consumer magazine publishing field in New York City. In the early part of his career, he learned about the finer points of print publishing to create some of the most well-known global consumer and technology magazine brands. For the last 2 decades, he has been at Extensis, helping customers create the best digital and font management experiences. And then I'm going to be probably mostly, Monday morning quarterbacking or just kibitzing with things I think that are important. So I'm actually on the panel too. So I'm a CD Pug founder and current director of programming for CD Pug. My experience with fonts goes back to the Mac Plus, the first version of PageMaker, and the Apple Laser Writer, which was actually Apple's most powerful computer at the time. Spike still has, I still have the battle scars that I received in the font wars of the early days of desktop publishing. And I'm the president of Team Spike Consulting, a technology consulting and support business for visual artists. So let me close this poll here. And Dave, go ahead. I guess we should highlight you, and you could go ahead with your slides.
Yeah, so number one, thank you so much for this opportunity. I know I came to your meeting last month as well. Hopefully you're a little bit more used to my accent. I am originally from Manchester, England. I've been in the States now for 17 years in May, but yeah, still sound like I just stepped off the plane. I'm aware of that. So yeah, really my job at Extensis, I've been there a couple of years now, and it's changed significantly really since the pandemic hit. I'm really trying to build community for Extensis, particularly with freelance designers, agencies, etc. And I was going to be doing that by going to a whole host of events last year, the Summit, How Design, AIGA conference, etc. And then obviously everything got flipped on its head. So over the last few months, really what I've been doing is trying moving that strategy that I put together online and trying to actually start doing presentations like this with support from other Extensis staff to design groups, etc. So I'm really, really thankful for this opportunity to do that. So I will get started. As Spike said, he's definitely going to be quarterbacking on this. Spike and I have been working really closely on this over the last few weeks. So what's tending going to happen is I'm going to go through the slide. There's 8 to go through, but we're going to try and get through that relatively quickly, and then get to really the meat and potatoes of this, which is the Suitcase Fusion demo. So I'll be on hand to answer questions, as will Spike to kind of add in as well, and Chris Meyer too. So I will get started, and hopefully we can go to the next slide. And let's see. Okay, so here's our agenda. We're going to go through a bit of font basics. So trends 2021, type 1 fonts that I know Spike's going to want to talk a little bit about, as well as myself, and then the current font industry. Just a little bit of information on, why a font management program is so important, the types of font management programs out there, and really what to look for in a professional font management program. And then these are in no particular order. We're then going to jump into the Extensis Suitcase demonstration, but we're going to make sure that we cover all of these tactics, all of these different parts in here for you. And again, stop us along the way, ask myself questions, ask Chris Meyer questions as well. Okay, so let us get started. So font trends 2021 and beyond. So this is a real big thing, and this is something that Spike and I have talked about at great length over the last few weeks, which is type 1 fonts, the discontinuation of those as of January. It is going to be through January 2023. We have got a larger, broader slide about that, and I'm going to drop a link into the chat as well a little bit later on, where if you don't already have that information, you can go and look for yourself. So, the first thing to look out for as well is really this update from multiple masters. Now it's all about variable fonts, responsive fonts as well. Spike, I didn't know if you wanted to maybe just mention responsive fonts a little bit and why you wanted to highlight that.
Well, I didn't really want to have this program be about the creative part of fonts, because I don't think that would be too thin of a topic. We wouldn't be able to fit in the management part of it. That could be a separate program, which I'd like to do in the future. So I kind of just wanted to think of some of the major things that are changing from the mechanical part, or how you're going to be affecting with purchasing or using fonts. So the things that I've noticed that are coming out are variable. I guess they're not brand new, multiple masters. I remember those from the old days, but now they're called variable fonts, and those are available. And then with the advent of web design, there's a lot of fonts that are being designed to be responsive. So and I haven't had to deal with those very much recently. Like, fonts seem to work a lot better than they used to do in the old days, so I don't have to troubleshoot them as much. But those are some of the things that you'll be encountering. the type 1 will go away, and I think that's in the next slide, but the advantages of true type and open type and why type 1 is going away is it's cross-platform, Mac and Windows, and you have, I mean, I guess, lots of glyphs, not just small caps and ligatures, but you have ordinals, fractions, lots of extra characters. But to me, the real reason why you have these new font types for is really the Asian languages, just because it opens up all those characters for selling your products to the billions of people that in China and the rest of Asia.
Absolutely. Okay.
All right, so let's go on to the next slide there.
All right. So this is where we get into the little bit of the meat a little bit more. And you can see here, I've got a link on this slide here. I am going to put this, as I say, in the chat a little bit later on for everyone. This is a real deep dive into the discontinuation of type 1. But what Spike and I did was just kind of try and collate and condense this information into just a few bullet points. But there is more to it. So legacy format for all Adobe products ending January 2023. So we have got plenty of time. It's just Photoshop right now, which was a couple of months ago. So type 1 fonts are going to show as missing. And it is going to be supported when embedded through EPS and PDF format. So your type 1 fonts purchased from Adobe will receive a discount for open type from a recommended vendor. Again, there's a lot more information about that on the link that I'm going to put in the chat. And the same with this one too. Your type 1 fonts purchased from a third party you do need to contact the foundry where you got them. Again, there's more information on that in the link that I'm going to send. And that's what we really know a little bit right now. So, for software applications like even the Mac operating system and Windows, still not clear right now. Again, it's not going to be like we get to January 2023 and then all the information is going to be there. They'll obviously roll out information all along the way. And people like myself and Spike and Chris will obviously be kept abreast of all of those developments as we move along as well.
Yeah, so to me, it's really interesting. Like people, when I didn't really know right away, but people got the notifications when they launched their Creative Cloud apps, and they were kind of panicked. I'm thinking, oh my God, like it's going away like this coming January. But you have over a year, almost 2 years. So it's and the facts are kind of sketchy. I mean, this is what's officially on the Adobe website, but the real world consequences will have time to kind of figure that out. So I don't panic yet, but I guess maybe start budgeting for type 1 fonts that you may have to replace with other fonts. That would be the bottom line for that. All right, so go ahead, Dave.
All righty. Okay, so if we look at the current font industry, we just wanted to kind of outline as well who are the popular font vendors for you. You're probably aware of these already. So Adobe Fonts, formerly known as Typekit. Some of you might know them as well. So licenses availability subject to change, obviously, and you cannot be collected for output. So Creative Cloud license is required for that. Again, you're probably aware of that, but we just wanted to highlight that for you. Google, totally web focused, again, as you're probably aware. And then we've also got Monotype as well, which are a big player. Obviously, purchased Agfa, Linotype, Bitstream, Font Shop, MyFonts and Fonts.com websites as well. There's more out there, but those were the biggies that we wanted to highlight to you as well.
I didn't realize that Monotype had been acquiring all these places. So like, Monotype is kind of absorbing lots of smaller or lots of foundries that you are familiar with from over time. But then there's lots of small boutique places that you can still get your fonts from.
Yep. All right. So I'm nearly done. I've got 3 more slides, I promise, and we'll get to Chris. So, as I say, I've been with Extensis for a couple of years now and really had to learn my trade. I'm a very confident marketer, but I had to understand the font and DAM industries as well as what I was moving into, and really needed to understand, well, why is font management so important? I worked for the ad agency, as Spike said, in Cincinnati for several years. All I did as an account executive was give a graphic designer a job, and expected it back, as we all do, in 4 hours, never really understanding, what it took. Mary's laughing, but that's what account executives are like. They don't understand what a designer goes through to get them that job that a client has asked for. So, I needed to understand, why is font management so important? Well, messy font collections, number one. A lot of designers have got way too many fonts. The difficulty maintaining usage and consistency, particularly when they are utilizing multiple clients, like, as Spike pointed out at the ad agency I worked at, our designers were working with Kroger, Fresh Express, Kikkoman Sales, Procter and Gamble, and just think of how many brands fall under those labels. So how many fonts that they had to deal with on a daily basis, and operating systems and applications, sluggishness. So now that I'm removed from that, now I have a better understanding of why the graphic designers in my place of work down I-75 were running around all day, and I was wondering, well, why is it taking them 4 days to get this really simple job to me? Now I understand why. So there's several types of font manager out there. Again, this isn't a showcase for us to tell you how great Extensis are, but you can go with a very basic one like FontBook that are out there right now. There is font viewers that you've probably seen as well that are typically really cheap, or some of them are even free, but they're not very professional, and there's not very much integration. And we just wanted to obviously highlight here that, so with Extensis, we have the Suitcase Fusion. We have the Suitcase Team Sync, which is for, multiple teams basically, which is a cloud-based font server. And then we have the Universal Type Server as well, which is the on-premise font server as well. Is everyone, just show of hands, is everyone mostly aware of those three programs, the Fusion, Team Sync, and Type Server, Universal Type Server, kind of? Okay. So Chris is going to go into that more anyway. So, okay. And these are the things, there's lots of different programs out there, but, certainly wanted to highlight to you, if you're still looking for one right now, or you're not incredibly happy with what you're using, these are some of the things that certainly you want to be looking for in your font management program. You want to be able to activate and deactivate. You've got the control over that. You want your precise font matching. You want your font activating plugins. That's just so incredibly important, obviously. Corruption checking's obviously a biggie as well. And you really need this safekeeping in a secure location too. And then really at that server level, distribution, synchronization, reporting, license compliance, which is a biggie. Since my time at Extensis, that's what I've heard more about than anything else. When there's questions about font, it seems to be always about the license compliance and making sure everyone's compliant with what they are going to use. So I ran through these quickly because I definitely wanted to get through to the demo, where I know you're going to have a lot more questions. Is there anything that I went through over the last 6 or 7 minutes that didn't make sense, or you've got more questions for me or Spike or Chris?
I think most of the questions are in the chat, so maybe you can look at those, Dave, while Chris is presenting, and I will do that.
So I'm going to I'm going to stop sharing, throw you over to Mr. Chris Meyer now, who is my guru at Extensis. He's been there a lot longer than I have, but he's not necessarily older than me. Chris is not only training me, but he's training the whole of the marketing team as well on how all these products work. So I think you're going to really enjoy what he has to say. So I am going to stop the share right now, and it'll be over to Mr. Meyer.
All right. Hello, everyone. Can you see my screen of Noto Sans?
Yes.
That was just a question that came up in the chat, and I didn't know it off the top of my head, so I used my favorite search engine, and it came up and told me that it is a Google font. So with that said, it's not a required font, and so is likely something you could remove. We'll discuss that a bit, and hopefully I'll answer the questions. I'm really bad at watching the chat and seeing people raising their hands too in Zoom. So if, I'm open to questions. If you just don't mind, try and keep them relevant to the topic. If you have something that you really want to ask, let's talk about it after. I'm planning to hang around the duration. So
Yeah, and Chris, when I can talk about the Noto Sans, because it's not really a Google Fonts issue, but that's, I don't think we want to do that now. We want to at least let you get some momentum going before we
Sure.
get into other topics like that.
Sure. Yeah. All right. And as Dave mentioned, this isn't really, obviously we have different font management programs, and we're going to discuss, and I'm going to use that as my platform, but really I want this to be beneficial. Hopefully my experience, I'll share all of the experience that I have with you all. Any questions that you have, we'll try and answer. For me, being at Extensis a long time, I was a customer beforehand. So prior to 20 years ago, I was in that publishing and advertising business, as Spike had mentioned. And so I focused a lot on production. I have probably just as many war wounds with PostScript Type 1 fonts as Spike as well. But I've kind of evolved over the years, as the fonts have. And I'm hoping that kind of what we're going to show is sort of highlighting some of the differences as to why you might want a professional font manager over some of the other solutions that are out there, and even just kind of how our stuff works, so you can understand how it integrates with your workflow, which is really the key point here, is that we are focused, we're agnostic to fonts. We're not a font vendor. We don't sell them. We don't make them. Our goal is to try and help you manage them, regardless of where they come from. And while we do, I think, a good job on a lot of levels, there's always room to grow. And so any feedback you have of specifics in your world will be helpful to us as well. So what you're looking at here is the Suitcase Fusion interface. It was around a suitcase for 25 years, and it turned to Suitcase Fusion somewhere back in the early 2000s when we fused another popular application called Font Reserve and Suitcase together, and to try and make the best of breed between the two. And it's been Fusion since, and we actively develop it for both Mac and Windows platforms. I'll show you the Mac today. Primarily everything's the same on Windows, with the nuances to the Windows platform. So if you are on Windows, I know there's at least one Windows person lurking in the crowd here. So if there are more and you have questions, let me know. And if I don't know them today, I will get you answers for those questions. And I'll take little breaths or pauses. So if anybody has a question, you can insert yourself at that point. So everything is fonts are built into libraries generally, or at least organized into libraries. And so that's the way most font managers are built today. And the idea is for you to be able to create different libraries from different sources. And so you might have some libraries that come in locally from, on your desktop, on your own system. You might have libraries that are in the cloud that you share with other users. And we'll talk a little bit about that and how that can kind of benefit small teams, or teams that, especially now with more of us working remotely, you might have the need to share projects with other people across the state, across the country, the globe, whatever it may be. And so a lot of these tools are kind of bridging the gap to that. And so that's, another thing that kind of separates some of the basics, like a font book. Font book's a great tool. It's come a long way, just like, Windows has some capacity for managing fonts as well, but they're really designed just to manage the fonts that are on your local system, and possibly even a little bit further out. But beyond that, they're really basic functionality. And so some of the things we have that hopefully are going to sort of spark your interest is, as I mentioned, workflow stuff, how it all integrates with other applications that you use. So if you're an Adobe Creative Cloud user, if you're an Affinity project or product owner. So the publisher or the designer applications, the photo application, those are becoming really popular now, especially for individual or freelance type customers. As well as if you're doing UI work like Sketch or XD or stuff like that. And so we've built different library capacities. The local library has been there for the longest time prior to the cloud being a thing. There's another library called the Type Sync. So if you are an active customer for Suitcase Fusion, you have the ability to create a cloud library. What's really nice about this is a personal cloud library, and so you can enable it and disable it through the user interface. And this builds your own personal cloud space. And so if you're a user and let's say you have two systems, or you have an assistant that you work with, or a co-designer, you can share that using the same connection. So the same you would connect through your email address. That's the way that you set up this account. And any fonts you put up in there are backed up for you. So it's a stored library. And by default, Suitcase Fusion offers you 2 licenses. There was a question that I had gotten in advance about Mac, someone having a Mac and Windows system. And so you can utilize both systems with Suitcase Fusion under that license. And it is a simultaneous license, so you don't have to have one working and not the other. If you try, and actually the way that our licensing is written up is you can actually install Suitcase on as many systems as you have. You would just only be able to attach 2 at a time. And when you try to get on with the third, you'd be booting off the other 2. So keep that in mind if this kind of meets your workflow. If you need more than that, we have multiple type licenses. We call that Team Sync. And Team Sync is a shared license strategy. We use that internally in our own organization. And so I'm going to show you that at some point here. But I have different libraries for different purposes. And so my cloud library has all kinds of different fonts in there that I'll use to show you some examples of how I go in and out of applications. Everything I'm doing is hypothetical or made up, right? So if you have specific workflow instances or things, let me know. And if I can't demo it today, I'll show you for future demos. We also do some connection to third-party libraries, which is becoming more and more popular for us. So if you are a Google Fonts user, we plug directly in with Google. We have a direct API to their service. So as they add new fonts to the service, you'll get those automatically. You'll see that number creep up. I think the slides had mentioned that Google's focus is primarily web. They're utilizing all of these great fonts for SEO purposes, so they can see what people are talking about and for search and optimization. But they're really great fonts. They're not all high quality, so don't assume that they're all created equal. But for the most part, they're available to you as a designer, both in a personal and professional license. The Adobe Fonts ones, which David mentioned, were formerly called Typekit. That was the original company that Adobe had purchased. There still are what they call Typekits, but that's a web-based font setup. And I don't know if you have ever gone into Creative Cloud, for those of you who are Creative Cloud users, but besides your apps, you'll see that there's actually an access to the font panel that they have there. You can activate and deactivate fonts through there. You can browse out to their service. Oops, opened up on my own screen. All right. And so you can shop for fonts here. As long as you're a Creative Cloud licensed user, you're able to access these fonts. You cannot share these fonts. You cannot pass these to or collect for output for these. So keep that in mind. The person you're sending to would have to have a Creative Cloud license themselves to be able to use those fonts. You can download unlimited numbers of fonts at this point in time. And they have some font packs, which you can use. Font packs are limited in the amount of time you can use them, but you can continue to activate them. So if you went in and you like this specific font pack, you could go in there and turn it on for these 21 fonts for 180 days. And this is Adobe's curation of the different font libraries. They pull out fonts that they think pair well together, or they get a lot of feedback from their creative environment, and they put these together. And Adobe is not just the only ones out in here. So there's a bunch of different foundries and people who license directly to Adobe, similar to Monotype. Monotype's ecosystem similar, except Monotype is obviously not embedded within the Creative Cloud as much. So there are Monotype fonts in here. That's because Adobe has gotten perpetual license to use those fonts throughout time, and those are also those fonts are also mostly from older foundries like Linotype and ITC, foundries that are really not around anymore that Monotype absorbs. So those licenses are pretty much for you to use. And someone had asked in the chat about Creative Cloud fonts. So one thing to note is the licensing does change from time to time. And so if you are utilizing some of these fonts for client jobs, just be aware that at any given point that contract with Adobe could expire and they would remove them. Adobe's been pretty good about giving some notice, but sometimes that could really affect you, especially if you've done like web type work for a client and you've got it on their website and it's all throughout their brand. You just need to be aware that if that font license should be removed from Adobe service, you would have to go out and purchase directly with the foundry. So my suggestion would be, if you are using these for commercial purposes, make sure you're aware and you document who the foundry is and who the contact information would be in the event that ever happens. It has happened before. It doesn't happen all the time, but I would imagine that it will continue to happen. Because all of those foundries pay money to Adobe to be in their service. So, all right. So in addition to that, we'll take a look at all of the system fonts. I know there was a question I got in advance about Windows. On the Mac, there are multiple system locations that are kind of monitored by Suitcase. We don't necessarily remove the fonts or do anything, but we try to avoid conflicts around those fonts. We do the same thing on Windows. Windows is a little bit simpler. On Mac, fonts are used in the capacity or the configuration of each user, whereas on Windows, it's system-wide. So if you were to actually remove a font from the system in Windows, it would take it away from everybody. You could remove stuff from the Mac per user and not affect other users. So if you're in an environment where you have shift work and you might have 3 or 4 users using the same system, on a Mac, you can control what each user has access to. And if you haven't seen it, let me see if I have a copy of it available here. I can just give you a quick show. Look at that. So for Mac and Windows, we have best practices guides. These are a good place if I know that the group here probably runs the gamut of how in depth on fonts you are and how to manage them at best on your machines. These guides are a pretty good starting resource. We update them all the time. We're in the process of updating the Big Sur one now for Mac, so I know that'll probably be a hot question. I'm thinking it's going to be any day now that we get this one out. This one that I'm showing you here goes up to Catalina, which is 10.15. And it goes through a whole bunch of different points of how to kind of the best practice of getting rid of things you don't use or need, how to create group libraries and sets within your font manager if you choose to use a font manager, pairing out and getting rid of duplicates, so on and so forth, collecting fonts if you have fonts in Microsoft Office or Creative Cloud. Lots of good information, and these are free off of our website, both Mac and, like I said, a Windows version. So check those out if you've never seen them. We put a lot of time and effort into those specifically to answer as many of the frequently asked questions that we hear. And if you have one that we didn't answer, send it to Dave or myself, and we'll try and get it added into that document. Any questions so far?
When there was a question about the, I guess the window shade feature and the sidebar, does that work in the older versions of Suitcase 2, or is that new in the latest, in the subscription model version? You know, where you can
This
tell
one?
the type sync libraries, the local libraries.
Oh,
third-party
yeah.
part.
They work in some older versions, depends on how old you're talking. I know that we probably have people ranging from version 7 and up, 7, 8, and 9. This is not, it's technically 10, but it's a subscription version. Back in November 2019, Suitcase rolled over to a subscription license, so no more perpetual. I'm pretty sure the last couple versions had very similar UI. There may have been some things taken out. We did a major overhaul to the software back in version 7. So there were some things that had gotten dropped. There were some things that had been added. So probably if you're on 7 and above, you should have most of this. If not, I didn't check the versions, but like if you have a discrepancy, we can chat after. The one thing you don't have in some of the older versions is you might not have the font list. When we did the overhaul, it was something that had been, I don't want to say deprecated, it was just something that didn't make it over to version 7, and it's back now. It's actually better now than it was before, but there were some big bugs and issues around it. And as we moved to new architecture, because Suitcase has been around for 25 years, and it was an Adobe product. Actually, it was a 5th generation systems, and then eventually it was owned by Adobe for a very short time, and then sold to Extensis back in the 90s. And so Extensis has been maintaining and building off of it since. Back then, it was just a simple Mac version, and now we have server versions and all kinds of stuff. But the technology had aged, and so that's why a lot of that went away. But I know this list view is probably one of the top features that a lot of customers have been very keen on. So, all right, feel free to ask questions if you got them, and I'll roll forward. So one of the big value pieces to Suitcase is its ability to activate and deactivate within other host applications. And so one of the common, it's actually the number one value proposition for us, because so many people use these plugins. And the way that the plugins work really powerful is when you have, you don't have to just be an individual designer. If you're working on a team, it helps you with consistency. It helps you make sure that you're using the exact same fonts. And I know in pre-press workflows, you're really set on not substituting fonts, and there's lots and lots of differences. I'll give you a quick understanding of sort of the way that we decipher duplicates, because I think that that's one of the things also that comes up that's way more important to people in pre-press. It may not be as important to designers, although it depends on your how many like Helveticas, let's say, right? Like everybody has tons of Helveticas. There's not just one Helvetica, and so you need to know, well, which one do I want to use? And I want to make sure I use the one that was in the document. If you're creating something new, you might not be as selective, but you want to do that. So let me just kind of show you. We have a technology underneath. It's called FontSense, and it's kind of an important component, because it's kind of what separates the professional from, like, let's say, a font book. So most fonts are identified by applications by different criteria. And so not to be confused by the PostScript type 1 font, but there is a underlying table called PostScript name. And that is the name that a lot of applications rely on. And sometimes that's all they focus on, or they focus on a couple of pieces of information where you may not be factoring in certain things. So you want to be certain that the font that you've used, or that someone hands you a document, the font that was used, if you're going to output that document for them, you want to make sure that you are either using the exact same font, or you're notified when you don't have it, so that you can get the right font. So we have a technology that kind of looks at a lot of different things, and it puts a fingerprint on it. And that fingerprint is unique to the font, but not unique across systems. So if I did a job with Suitcase on my system and I handed it off to Dave, when Dave goes to open it, if he has my fonts, it's going to activate and utilize those fonts exactly. If he doesn't, he's going to get a warning that tells him that something's missing and give him some information on how to go and acquire, so he can come back and acquire with me and say, hey, I don't have the Avenir bold, or whatever it might be. And so we utilize this, and we create this number, and you're going to see it throughout all of our products, our font products. And it's really key, because whether you're in Dave's Suitcase Fusion, my Suitcase Fusion, even if you're in one of our other font management products, you're going to see this number, and this number is going to be the truth. It's going to always put me back to the #1 spot. And that's always defined here. If you don't see this, it's a column that you can add to your UI, but by default, I think it may already be there. So these numbers are unique, and they'll help you. Like if I show you two, let's see if I can find a couple of them. So I have, using Helvetica as the example, I have 3 Helvetica thins, right? So what makes these different? Well, they all have different font sense IDs. I don't know, I'm looking at them, they all look pretty close to me. Now, I'm sure there are some people in the audience that are going to go, no, I see the difference. Maybe this one's a little different, but this one and this one look identical to me. They all have different numbers because they have different criteria. So in this case, it's pretty easy to see that they come from different versions. And versioning is really important. For those of you who haven't really kind of, other than understanding what a font does, a font is created like software, right? Because it's almost like a mini program. Everything's a mini program. It's not like a digital asset, like a photograph where you place it in a layout and you call it good. This can be manipulated. You can have different, text, different type, right? You can use it multiple times. And so it's sold, even though it's used like an asset, it's sold like software. And so if you're going to put this on a system, you have to have a license for it. But what happens over time is you get different versions. The foundries update, they add more glyphs, they fix bugs and issues that are in their software, whatever it may be. And so these numbers never lie. And so if you built the document with one initially, and then the wrong one gets substituted, you can be in for trouble. And so I'll give you an example of that. So let's do this. I think I will grab Illustrator, and let's do InDesign. I have a document for InDesign, I think handy. So real simple, so that you're not looking at too much in a layout. But think about if you had this complex advertisement for a product and you had price in there and you needed it in euros. Right? You want the font that you created it with, let me get this out of the way. You want to make sure that you have the right font that has euros in it. And so, actually, I'm going to do this. Hold on. Let me try that again so you can see what, just turn the font off. I want to go back and give you like the kind of, so as you open a document, you want to make sure that the font that was in that document is utilized. And so what the font manager should do is it should know which one's in there. It should activate it. That's what these blue diamonds represent, is that it's been auto activated. And you can see that I have 2 duplicate fonts. Matter of fact, there's not a lot, but when you look at these to your eye, you can't see a difference because they're the same version, same open type version, but where did they come from? How are they different? And so you want to make sure that if this is the product that your customer wants, you're getting the text right. What if subtly you didn't have the right version and it got substituted without any notification? So the font that I just substituted it for is the identical one, except it doesn't have the glyph for the euro. So this could be what you wind up with if you go to output and print it. So that's not what you want. You want to make sure. And so what's nice is when we don't have the right font, we'll indicate it to you that, hey, this font is missing. We'll give you the option to substitute or not. But you always want the font that was intended for the document. And so by default, we will read those font sense data. We save that to the documents. So when you're working in Creative Cloud and you're using our auto activation plugins, they save that information right into the file. So you don't have to worry about it. And when you hand that file off to another user who might be doing more work to it, they're going to get the same information, and it's going to give them an indication. If they have it, it automatically activates it. So it's kind of a no-brainer. You can focus on the design and what you do and not have to worry about, did I use the right font? Did I not use the right font? And like I said, if it doesn't come up, if it doesn't have it, it'll get a dialogue. And I'm sure I'll be able to reproduce that scenario so you can kind of see that too.
I was a pocket.
What's that? Sorry, I
I've
missed that.
seen something similar, Chris, that it's not quite the same as what you're showing here, but if you usually people have lots of Helveticas, and there's something that happens mostly in browsers, not as much as it used to, but it still happens, like where looks like you're looking at Russian characters on your web page, like call it going Cyrillic.
Mhm.
And that's usually caused by a Helvetica new or a Helvetica fractions. So I usually try to turn those off, but you have to use process of elimination for that because it's not auto activating like it would for a page in a layout program. So I don't know if you have any comment about that.
Yes. So generally design applications that you're building layouts or creative pieces in will not substitute your fonts automatically. That's not to talk about Microsoft Word or PowerPoint, because those will substitute. But if you're designing there, then maybe we have to have a different conversation with you about it. But think about browsers and Microsoft applications as a place that have cascading font usage. So for example, if it doesn't find the font that was used, it will substitute and use whatever is the cascading font. And if it can't find its list, it will default to something like a fractions or something. And the reason it does that is to let you know, hey, you don't have a cascading font. You don't have the font that I need. You don't have the cascading one. So I'm going to give you some really gross glyphs or character forms, so you could go, oh, there's something wrong with this. And a lot of people removed fonts or have removed fonts from their systems, not realizing that those programs cascade down to them if they can't find the font that was used in the original document, whether it be a web page or a file. So that's generally how that stuff kind of rears its ugly head. All right. Keep me on time too, Spike, because I can go hours on this stuff. So
I'm sure everybody's absorbing this like intensely.
Let's talk a little bit about our integrations with those products so that you can see, like, if you have applications that you use. So I was just showing InDesign. Let me close this for a second. I'll come back to that. So I have a bunch of documents that so Extensis uses InDesign to create its collateral, right? And so I'm going to just grab a basic one sheet. It's probably got 2 or 3 different fonts in it. And it comes out, so we have 2 designers that go back and forth with information, and they don't want to have to figure out. We have our brand, we have our corporate branded fonts, and we use them. And so if you look, you can see, I'll show you, where are they? So we use GT Walsheim. That's our go-to font. And so you can see these automatically get activated, and it was really just instantaneous. Now this is a small file. If I had a book or something big with multi-pages, it would take longer. The way that the plugin works is that it reads the document, it reads those those font sense IDs, and it knows which fonts. If it doesn't, I will get dialog boxes that tell me, hey, I'm missing this version. Do you want to substitute it? You have a version, or no, I don't have a version even available to me. Do you want to take this information down? And it gives me the ability to go and locate it without accidentally printing the document. But the workflow is pretty consistent across all of these docs. So these are similar docs for different topics. And so this is what it looks like as it's reading in. So you'll see that the fonts are substituted, and then it will kind of jump in and select them. You come back over here. You'll see when I close out, this one's based on document close. When I close out, you'll see that those actually got, oops, I don't want to activate 140. You'll see that they are now disabled, not disabled, but deactivated, right? So they activate and deactivate as needed on command. One of the benefits to that is if you have used the wrong Helvetica in one dot, or not wrong, but used a different version, you're not going to get substitution to the other. You don't want reflow. You don't want other issues that might happen. So you want to make sure that as you're going through and opening up different documents to work, just drag it behind. You want to make sure that those fonts are being read in to the workflow and opened up. So that's how our designers go back and forth within design to be able to make creation changes. Like, for example, if I think I have purposefully misspelled something, right? And so designer 1 has created this document. Designer 2 is now going through, cleaning up, getting it ready for production. Going to go to output or create a digital file, make the save. If they decided, okay, I want a different font in here, I don't like this font, they can easily select the font, make the change by highlighting a new font. Activating a new font through Suitcase, save it, and then that font gets tagged to the document and becomes available. So pretty easy to do it. You don't have to do any kind of special work to make sure that font sense ID gets associated with the document. It's just use the plugin. The plugins, you can always tell if you have the plugin installed because it's through the type menu, and InDesign, it's a little bit of different places in the other apps. And it's got some basic functionality that you can control. Font sense support is a thing that's on by default. Keep in mind, if you are associating and working with other designers and you want to use this workflow, it has to be on for all of you. If one person has it off, they kind of break the chain. Because if the font sense IDs are not being added to the document, you won't get that continuous flow. There's a pick best match option. I don't recommend it if you don't want something that's close, but it's designed for if you do not care about substitution and you just want the closest version. We will use an intelligent criteria to pick one. So we would, if, for example, if you had used an open type one and you don't have it anymore, we'll look for an open type one with the same name. If we don't find it, we'll look for one that is maybe a different type, like a true type, and cascades down to PostScript. So it goes open type, true type, PostScript, and it also goes by version. We'll always pick like the top version. So basic criteria to try and pick for you if you don't. So if you just don't want to see dialogues and you just want to pick, you're not too worried about fonts because you're not going out, you're not doing client jobs, you can turn this one on and it will help you. But the font sense will really hone in on what font was used prior to you getting that document, and it'll make sure that you're at least aware of what you should be using, if not automatically activating.
Chris, can you show where the plugins are for Suitcase? I mean, maybe you already had it in your scripted in your demo, but I think that that's one of the big benefits of getting the subscription and upgrading from the older version.
Yes, and there was a question, so I'll answer that now and show you that. So there was a question like, how quickly do we come out with plugins when Adobe updates? We've been really good at being what we call 0 day. So when Adobe announces, which is generally in October, the week of Adobe Max, which is when they usually talk about their latest new versions, we're delivering a Suitcase version that same week. The only time that will be delayed is if there were big issues and we had to fix them. And by the way, a lot of times I'll talk to customers and they'll say, why do these plugins, take so long? Or why are they so, why is it so expensive? And, why do we have to pay for plugins? And in reality, this is the number one place where Extensis develops is the plugins. It costs Extensis a lot to build them because we are interacting and interfacing with Adobe. We are starting early. We have a partnership with them. We do all pre-releases and we go through that. And sometimes even at the last minute, they make changes or they merge changes into their final code. And so that's why sometimes we'll be delayed. But overall, we try to do it same time frame. And you just, if you've already installed the Adobe app and you didn't have Suitcase Fusion in there, all you have to do is come here where it says Manage Plugins and then by application. And these are the main apps that we will do plugins for. You can just check the box and it will automatically install it for you. So for example, if you get After Effects 2022 in October, all you have to do is come here. And you may need an upgrade to the client version. Under subscription, you get that, and it will come up automatically. I've already updated this version, but you could always check for updates. But if it's not up to date, you get a dialog box that says, "Hey, there's a new version available with plugins for 2022," and you install it. And when you install it, it will actually go and scan your hard drive, look to see what CC applications you have installed, and it will automatically add the appropriate plugins.
How far back do you go right now as far as versions of Creative Cloud? And I guess like if you still have the CS, I guess it's Suitcase 9, how far forward does that go to?
So Suitcase 9, you're challenging my knowledge here. Suitcase 9, I think, goes to 2019, maybe 2020, but that was where it ended. Generally we go back 3 versions. So right now we support 19, 20, and 21. We try to do the same, and sometimes it varies. It depends on what the changes are. We try to do the same thing with operating systems. So with Mac, we're supporting 14, 15, and 11. So 10, 14, 10, 15, and 11. On the Windows side, it's a little different, but I know we do Windows 10, Windows 8.1. We may have dropped 8.1. I don't deal with the Windows side as much, but we try to give customers enough of a ramp. It will change because now that things are subscription, you'll probably be able to run the program still under subscription, even if you don't update to the latest. So if you have a reason to be back, and I'd be curious to know like what types of reasons prevent you from moving. I know you don't move on, a lot of people don't like to move on day one, but I think after 3 years, especially if it's been deprecated already or end of life by the manufacturer. So like when Adobe says we're not supporting CS6 anymore, other than you not wanting to spend more money, I would love to understand other reasons why you would have to stay back that far, because it helps us to understand our development plans too.
I guess like what I see with Suitcase is the biggest, there's lots of new improvements to the new versions, but the most blatant reason to upgrade to the subscription is when you need for the benefit of having current plugins. At least that's the pain point that people see to begin with, and then make it, and then I'm glad you're showing all the extra features, because those are bonuses that people aren't necessarily aware of.
Yeah, and they're all, again, we're trying to tie things to workflow. So we're trying to, one of the big benefits is we're trying to get you out of using this interface as much as we can, right? And so if you're in InDesign and you're working on something, we have a little panel. I'll show you how you access it. It's pretty easy. It's under the window menu. A lot of people don't even know that this exists. You go to Extensions, Extensis, and it will pull up. I'll tear it off so you can see it by itself. it'll pull up this cool little panel that allows you to work within your application. So you don't have to go back and forth. This is representing all of the fonts you see in Suitcase. It sees your third-party libraries as well, so you can see. And it gives you the ability to create what are called digests. What a digest is, it's kind of like a set. However, it allows you to create multiple sets within one. So, or a library and a set, like you can combine them. So for example, if I wanted to go and, actually, let's do this 1 second. I wanted to show you variable fonts because I know that was what you had talked about, Spike. So let me just kind of come over here. I'm going to do it the same thing that I was going to do in InDesign. I can do in Illustrator as well. So this is not a limited to this product. Let me grab a Illustrator document.
Activating the panel is slightly different, and I know I can always find them, but they're not exactly the same place in each application.
Illustrator and InDesign are the same. I think Photoshop has a different place,
right,
because
that's right. Yeah,
it's of the way that app is built. We've kind of lobbied with the Photoshop team, but they've got a different idea. Fonts are not as prevalent there. Same thing with like After Effects. Their team does it a little bit differently. But what's really cool is like if you wanted to go find a font, so let me kind of come down and find a font that I might want to activate. And I can search as well. So if I know the name of the font. And these panels have a lot of, like, we've been looking at them to consider a lot of different changes, but like all you have to do is have your selection of your dialogue, and then you can go, and this is great if you're building a new piece and you're not sure of the fonts you want. You could go in and you can say, well, let me create a digest. I want to go look through some fonts that I have, and you're going to be able to see all of your different libraries. And like I said, you can go drill into those libraries and you can pick all the Adobe fonts if you want, and it'll give you a list of those. And then you can say, well, but I want to add some other project fonts I have, whatever those are, right? And it will add those, and then you can save this digest, whatever you want to call it, right? And then you would now have this test fonts digest that you can filter through, and then you can select fonts that you want. They'll automatically activate and change in your screen. So you don't have to go back and forth looking through your stuff. You can search. If you know you're looking for a particular font, I don't know what's in here let's try, no X's, no FX's. You can grab fonts anywhere within your list. I think that changed. I looked away for a second. Can't look away. Sometimes it does it, sometimes it doesn't. And you'll see that didn't do it. There we go. And so you'll see that I have the ability, and it's automatically activating those fonts and making them available. So I can sample, I can create any of these that I want, as many digests as I want. So I can have either from here, or I can create sets over in the UI when I'm kind of sampling all my fonts in the views there. And then I can access them here real easily. It's a really cool function. In Adobe apps, there are variable fonts. So one of the questions had come up prior to today was do we support variable fonts? And so what variable fonts are is they're open type fonts, but there are numerous versions of that open type font, and they're combined on axes so they can sort of change their look and feel. And so, yes, we support them from the perspective of being able to insert them into the product, activate them, right? So I have a few here. But really where you're going to see the value of them, right? Because if I click on this one, you can't tell it's variable because there aren't any tools built into our product. We've been going back and forth discussing if we should put sliders and other things, but really where the value comes is when you're in your design app. And so if I want to go see the variable fonts, I can go back to my fonts and I can set up a brand new digest. And I know in my cloud library, under my samples, I have variable fonts. And so I'm going to select them. That's the group that you were just looking at. Whoops, I didn't name it. Sorry. I'm supposed to name it. Anyway, so there they are. Now, if I select one, let's say I want this tourney variable regular, I'll click on it. And the tools built into Illustrator, for example, there's a little variable tool here where if you click on it, you'll be able to see the different weights and you'll be able to use the slider to take advantage of all the features. And so to me, this is where the value is. And so that's why I think Extensis has been hesitant to put it into its UI. We've talked about it. If you think it's something that we should do, then let us know. Some of these, and by the way, all variable fonts are not created equal. Some of them might have a few axes, some of them might have more. So like, let's see if I think this one has less.
Chris, that probably are the variable fonts also web fonts? Because it seems if you have to pay a lot for web fonts, it seems if you can use a variable font, then that would be saving you money because you can build the kind of face you wanted, right?
Yes, and they can be, but keep in mind that the format is different. So the format for web fonts is WOFF, WOFF, and WOFF2. So there's two versions. There's some other older ones like EOT and some other stuff that's more deprecated now. EOT started on the Windows platform, but WOFF is the current one. And so yes, so a lot of the variable fonts you'll see if you purchase a variable font. Keep in mind variable fonts they're not as mainstream as people would like them to be, because for the ones you buy, they're very expensive. And the reason why is because it's like multiple different fonts all in one, right? So it hasn't really come down to the individual or small agency designers, but there's a lot being built for exactly what you say, so that it's dynamic and scalable in websites. And so you just have to make sure you have a WOFF version. And really a WOFF is just a bunch of open type versions wrapped within this web font container. Simplified.
I mean, this is like multiple masters used to be, except all they did was cause problems. They never seemed to work that well.
Yes. Yeah. Well, multiple masters. I mean, I'm gonna say that I still have a few multiple masters that I love and I refuse to give up. But yeah, this time I think I have to look from my cold dead hands, because there are definitely some that I still rely on. But there's more and more, like even in Illustrator alone, if you come to look, you'll see out on the right, you'll see variable. There already are variable fonts built in to both Google Fonts has like 96 variable fonts. And I think Adobe offers a handful as well. And so you can see them. And then of course you can acquire your own. There's some free ones out on the internet, which may or may not have a lot to them, but you can see like and this one only has a few sliders. The other one had like 12 sliders. I don't know all.
Can you do those in Affinity, or do you have to use the Adobe products to get those? Maybe Henry might know.
I don't know Affinity enough. I can show you, but I just don't know it well enough to know how they handle the variables.
Yeah, I haven't run across them yet on this end.
I'll make that as a follow-up for me, because I love those new Affinity apps, and I'm pretty new to them, but I'm digging in.
Yeah, so we are too.
Affinity, I was just doing some research. Affinity went from like 2 million users in like 2018 to 6.5 in 2021 during COVID time. So they're killing it, which is a good segue over to, let's talk about those. Any questions about this before I move on? How are we doing on time, Spike?
Well, right now it's long, but I bet you everybody's really excited and doesn't want to go, but maybe I'm just projecting my feelings. I don't know what to say. So I guess,
let's take a pause. What do we think?
Yeah, I guess I guess people can leave, but I mean, I don't want you to, how much more do you think you have as far as what you plan? Like how much?
Oh, I could go all day, Spike. So is there anybody that wants to talk about Affinity stuff? I can't see hands or anything right now. So Yay, nay? You tell me, Spike.
Uh,
No, I see some.
I can't see them either, but I guess we
I
can.
see some head nose.
I guess put some stuff in the chat, I guess. Or anybody, how are people's attention span holding up?
I've had a couple of people getting ready to leave because they've been, the day's long. So yeah, it's we're running a little bit on the long side right now. So I think we probably should touch bases on the major features.
Why don't we try to fit in, why don't we try to fit into 15 minutes, and then we can do Q&A right at the end of that. People can stick around if they want. The meeting will be recorded. It will be posted. Sarah will be posting it to YouTube as soon as she's able. So you can, if you do need to leave, you can watch the parts you missed. You just won't be able to poke Chris or Dave for questions. And, I've gotten texts that, you've been called the font god. So I guess people won't work with you, Chris, I suppose.
I'm not even close, but thank you. I appreciate it. I'll run with that for at least the weekend.
Yeah. So, and I
I don't know
guess
if you saw my shirt. I have the Font Disco shirt on, but I will now get a Font God shirt.
I'm wearing my Bitstream shirt. So the panel that's in Creative Cloud, does that sort of take away the tear off sheets in Suitcase? You don't need that anymore for you.
So you brought that up the other day, so I went back and looked. So the tear off sheets were kind of dropped a couple of versions ago, mainly because the team was seeing analytics and really they weren't being utilized. And when they moved over to the new technology, it was one of the things that didn't make it. So there are no tear offs. I think the panels really replace that or give you a lot more power than those because the tear offs were great to see it. It was almost like a facade, right? It was like old school tracing paper over an image, right? You'd lay a piece of tracing paper and you'd sketch out something. That's kind of what it was intended to do. And it was probably built 20 years ago. Now people can actually test and sample right within the application. And so I think that's why the team was like, well, we're not seeing high usage of that feature. Does it make sense to carry it forward?
That would explain every time I tried to show it, it didn't work right. What am I doing wrong? There's this really cool tear off feature, but I couldn't make it work.
Yeah, it's still in Universal Type Server, but I suspect it will go away at some point.
All right, that makes sense. Now at least I know. I won't embarrass myself in the future.
We do a lot of like anonymous analytics to kind of see how people are using the products, and so we don't know who you are, but we know volume of who's using, not using, and so the volumes were low there. But let me tell you this about, I'm not going to go deep into the affinity stuff, but I do want you to understand what we support, because if you are looking at those, so affinity applications do not offer a plugin architecture. So we can't build auto activation plugins there. However, we have this cool feature called document tracking. You turn it on. What's really cool about it is it allows you to drag and drop your documents. So for example, let me see if I have designer, right? So I don't have any designer docs. Let's see, do I have any designer docs that I can show you? I do, I have one, perfect. So you just drag it in and it logs it. And then what it does, there's a little eye here. It'll show you document information, where it's physically stored, the number of fonts used in it, if there are any tags, and what fonts it actually uses and their font sense ID and the versions. So really powerful for you to be able to track your documents. And we do it for Affinity, Sketch, and all the InDesign, all the Adobe apps that we have plugins. It's all based on plugins, except for Affinity. We were able to write this. What's nice about it is it will auto-activate fonts from here in Affinity apps. So if you double click on a file, like this one, for say, it will actually go and activate the fonts, which I think they're in here. Right, so it activated the ones that are used in this document.
You have to use this. You have to use this instead of going through the Finder, then, basically.
Yeah, if you want the fonts to automatically activate, yes. But what's cool is it'll work, and so I can just go in here and quickly change my file to make the changes without having to think about the fonts. It will also, if I make a change to the document, it will save that change. Let me see. I think I was doing stuff before practicing to make sure I got it right. You'll get like this little icon, little exclamation. So I made a save to this file. You can just go update and it will sync to the file.
That's nice that you can see where it is in the Finder from there.
Yes, and it'll go pull it for you. It does lose track to stuff if you move it. So for example, did I have one? I feel like I had one.
It don't move the cheese.
Yeah. Here, so it'll show you like if you're missing something, if it moved. Unfortunately, you have to delete it and reconnect it, but it's easy enough. When you find the file, you just drag it in to the interface, or you go to, it also works through the application itself. So as long as you're synced up, when you create a new document and you save it, it automatically connects to it. So it's a pretty cool function. I don't know what this file is. Hopefully it's work appropriate. I think I double clicked.
Did you know, Henry, did you know this already, Henry, or are you drooling now?
No, I've been looking at a couple activation features for the Affinity apps, and I've been looking at several other applications that are outside of Extensis. You know, like there's 2 other professional apps that are available on the Windows side that I've been looking at to get the same features that Suitcase had.
Well, definitely love to hear where you end up, and you know,
Yeah, because,
if you make a different decision than Extensis, it'd be great to just understand, you know, what did it for you.
Oh, no, I have Extensis Suitcase 9 for Windows right now. That's what I'm using.
Yep.
But going forward, there was no support, at least at the time I was looking. So it's becoming harder and harder to activate, not unlike on a Mac side where you have abundance of you know, apps that are available to you for activating fonts. Windows just handles it differently. So it's been a learning process on this end, working with Affinity, working with Microsoft Publisher, and working with other third-party apps on the Windows side. Because again, it's a whole different operating system. But you know, I work cross-platform from both a creative standpoint and also because of pre-press, because I have to jump back and forth between the 2 platforms. And a lot of times we're using open typeface to make sure that everything activates and it's consistent from platform to platform when we're jumping back and forth on documents. So the apps that I choose are very important in the fact that they have to be cross-platform and they have to work seamlessly between the 2 platforms.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And even Extensis has struggled through the years to get that perfect between both because of the nuances between those 2 platforms. But if you find that there's real deficiencies in your workflow, you can always send me or Dave the feature like idea or the product idea, because we're always looking for that kind of stuff too.
Definitely. Yeah, I mean, we're dealing with it day in, day out, you know, on this end. So we're definitely seeing you know, issues when we're getting questions from our customers as well too, because you know, they're also looking for the same things that we're looking for on our end.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I could go days with this stuff because I learned over 20
Hey,
years.
why don't you maybe show, like, I can think of one thing that I like to point out and maybe try to wrap up, and then we'll just do, you know, people can stick around for direct questions. But I find that you often need to clear your font caches, and Suitcase is really good for that. So if you want to at least show that, I think that it's for people that have Suitcase, it's anytime your fonts are acting wiggy, this is what I do.
Yeah, so it's a Mac only feature. There's no font caches or the concept of them on Windows. And what you do is, I have to find them. Where is it? Oh, here.
I'm usually helping people while I'm driving my car, and I can never remember what menu it's in.
Yeah, so it's funny because it's different on the Universal Type client. So that's why I've spent way more of my time doing Universal, like the corporate stuff than the individual stuff. But it's here, and what it does is there are some systems. It's not as, you know, keep in mind as you move more towards Big Sur and newer operating systems, it's not as key for that. Like I think I'm running 10.14 still. So it's a little bit backdated. It will go through and it will wipe out all of the extra. What Apple does is it creates these cache files for fonts so it can use them without having to go back to the well each time. And so sometimes they, in the past, in versions like 10.11, 10.12, all the way up to probably 10.13, 10.14, there were issues. And so that's why you'd use it. Now with 10.15 and 10.16, it's not as problematic. So you probably don't need to use as much, kind of alluding to what you said, Spike, about fonts just don't seem to have the problems they used to. But this is a good way to clear caches. I'm not going to do it because it's not necessary for me, but it will run through a process and it just wipes out those
files because it requires you to restart.
This does not. It will not. If you restart, it will wipe out other stuff, but this will go through and
it will
take out take out everything that it can. It will mark files that were in use, cache files that were in use, and it will wipe them when you do restart, but it doesn't require you to restart.
Okay.
But I mean, to be honest, I don't use it anymore. I used to a lot. 10.12 was like the worst. And the way that it would show up is if you went to, like, Adobe has their own too. You'd go to an application in the menu and you might see two of the same named fonts, or you might see a font name that had hieroglyphics or other characters in its name instead of the font name. That's the way that it would most commonly show up for users. So if you see that stuff, try that. It's a good little tip.
I think maybe a good thing to wrap up on would be at least a short discussion. We didn't talk about this in our planning session, but it's something I've learned a little bit about more since then, since I've had all these font things to pay attention to in preparing. But there's a folder inside the system folder, library fonts. It's like a protected folder that Apple puts fonts in. I think it's I don't know if it's for international languages or what exactly it's for. But if you look in InDesign or Illustrator, the Adobe apps, you'll see like 100 versions of Noto.
What operating system are you talking about? You talking about 10.15?
For Catalina, it's actually, I think it's in a bunch of them, but you'll really notice it more once you get to Catalina or Big Sur.
Yeah.
And Deborah Conkin is here. I think it affects, she's the one that discovered it and kind of, I didn't really think much about it. I think it's more like if you're really, if you're compulsive about your fonts, I guess maybe you might be a diplomatic term. I don't know. She has her camera turned off, so I can't see her making faces at me. But it puts a ton of fonts in there that you don't want, and it's interesting. So if you go to the font menu in InDesign there, I don't know if you'll see them in your system. What operating system are you on?
10.14.
Yes, you'll see, I don't know where they are. Yeah, there'll be like 100 versions of Noto. It's like scrolling across the English channel to get to the bottom of your font menu.
Yeah, so I've paired my system. I've pulled a lot of fonts out of the system folders that aren't necessary.
You can
based
remove
on that help guide.
And once you get to Catalina, you can't, the folder is protected as part of the system integrity protection for Apple. And so you can't remove the fonts. And once you get to Catalina or Big Sur, you can get rid of them in Catalina, but it's really hard. Big Sur, you cannot.
I was gonna say not easy, but you can get them if you.
Yeah. So
you're adventurous.
So everybody here now is probably gonna like look at that list now and go like, they didn't know this before, and they're gonna be mad. But there is a way to fix it up to Catalina, but it's really difficult after that.
So I mean, on the Mac, you have identifiable areas. So in the users folder, you have a fonts folder in the library, right? So everything's within like library. And so you could put fonts in here. Monotype Sky Fonts puts in here. Other products will put in there as well. So you can see what I've been testing. If you back out and you get to the hard drive level, System has one. This is the one that Apple continues to lock down more and more, right?
And
so there's lots of fonts in here.
Yeah, all those fonts are there. You can see them. You see them in the Adobe apps, but somehow Apple has a way to hide them. So if you open up Pages, they're not there.
Adobe has their own locations too, by the way. And Adobe, when you download your fonts from Adobe Fonts, here's a little test. Here's some little trick that I can show you on the Mac if you're not familiar with it. Go to About This Mac and go to your system report. And there's a place in fonts. This, by the way, this system is not, it's static. So if you make a change, you have to kind of refresh it. But if you come in here, you can see all of the fonts that the system is looking at as active. And you can see if they're valid or enabled. But you'll see these weird ones with little dots in front of them. These are obfuscated by Adobe, and you can easily track it because down in the data, it tells you where they're located. But these are the Creative Cloud fonts. And if you click on it, you can see what the font name is. So they do this on purpose so you don't go fishing for free fonts. But there's a font there, Attic Antique, which is this 27036.otf. Now, understand this, if I go pull that from this location, it's going to show up in my menu as 27036. I'd have to actually rename it internally, not externally. You can't just rename the file. It's got data within that's, but this is at least gives you an understanding of if a font is active. If you're in an application, you can't find it, come here, look for it, and you might like this is, you can see this one right here is active through Suitcase Fusion, right? Because it shows that it's in the vault for Suitcase Fusion. So this is a good way for you to understand, at least on Mac, what your system. I don't know of a good equivalent on Windows, but for Mac, you can see all of the fonts that the system is aware of under the current user.
Oh, okay. All right. So why don't you go ahead and wrap up, and then we'll do the we'll just do breakout rooms.
All right. Well, I mean, I've shown a lot. I probably have more to show, but I think at this point, since we're dwindling down to the last half a dozen, what burning questions do you have that maybe I can help you with?
There's a question from Lorelei. Is my Suitcase document tracking of all my Creative Suite files have a question mark? What is that about?
So it means that the documents were moved. And so let me go back and I can show that to you. I moved some of mine on purpose so you can see it. So if you move a file from its original location, you'll get a question mark because Fusion doesn't know where it is anymore. Unfortunately, you have to delete it to remove it. But if you wanted it back, you just take that document. I don't know which one that was. You just drag it back in. Oops. Same thing with this one. Why is this not? There we go. And then I can drag it back in from its original. So it means the location. You move the file from where Suitcase tracks it.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
I never set that up. Like I'm just like, I was shocked to see that I have like 1,600 files in the Adobe InDesign document tracking. Should I remove all those? Because I didn't put them there, and is it slowing things down?
It's not slowing things down. What's happening is because you're using the plugins, and every time you save a document, it will put it there. It's your call. If you don't see value in this feature, then you could just delete them. I'm trying to see if there was a way. I think there's a way where you can turn document tracking off altogether.
I don't mind it. I had never used it before, and I was just surprised to see so many in there. So I'll just delete all the ones that have question marks and then kind of start from scratch. That's helpful. Yeah,
and what's nice is you can see not only where the file is, but if you launch it from there, it will auto activate the fonts for you.
Okay, nice. Thank you.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Henry, do you see any questions that were in the chat that scrolled past me that I didn't see?
Actually, another one from Lorelei, which was I ended up with two font libraries, laptop and desktop. Is there at first they were the same number, Chris, but is there a way to merge them without losing the organizational system?
So you want to take them from each Fusion and move them. Yes, I think this is the answer.
Yeah, if I can send you if I can send you an image and then I can show you, it'll probably be easier to just show you that.
Yes.
Not here.
Yes. So what you would want to do is, so there's no way to merge them in the standalone client, meaning like locally, but you do have this type sync library. And so you can put anything you want up in there, and you should be able, let me see if I can do it by like, so if I wanted this structure, because that's what it sounds like, you have a folder structure.
No, I don't have any local libraries. I just have type sync libraries.
Okay.
And somehow, somewhere along the line, I ended up with 2 of them. And I don't know if it was like I bought a new laptop, and so somehow maybe installing Suitcase along the lines, it gave me 2. And originally I had the same document or the same fonts in both of them. But as time has gone on, one I used for the desktop and one I assumed was for the laptop. But then, you know, a year or so later after I started doing that, then it kind of seems like it's just I don't know, a problem, or then I didn't want to merge I didn't know what to do. So
Yeah,
now
Sorry.
Yeah, you could maybe just delete them and re-import them too, Lorelei, just
Well,
easily.
Let's, I'd be more than happy to take that offline and we can kind of figure it out together. And if there's an issue there, then we should probably fix it. But maybe it's just a simple like deciphering what's in there. And I don't know how you would get 2 either, but it would be good to see.
okay.
Yeah,
Is that something I could reach out to you about later? I'm kind of at my limit
Yeah.
today.
So
Oh, I don't mean tonight.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, you can email me at any time.
Okay.
We'll make sure that you have it.
I have Chris's
I've
email.
got your email address now. I'll forward you that
Okay.
slide that you wanted, and I'll CC Chris on the email, so you've got both mine and Chris's email addresses. Okay.
Okay, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah, no worries.
So thanks so much, Chris and David. Have a great night. And you
Yeah,
too.
you.